Hello, everybody. I want to touch on a topic that should be brought forth during the election. And in my belief, in talking with many people, it should be law and there should be consequences for people who break this type of law. We all know that there are courts in place to deal with parental alienation where one parent assists in the alienation of their children from the opposite parent. This happens in divorce, it happens in relationships, etc. But there are really no laws in place when it comes to grandparent alienation and consequences as a result thereof. I know a lot of people who have loving relationships with their grandchildren who at one point or another have had them ripped out of their arms because their adult son or daughter, there's a disagreement, someone holds a grudge. I'm just talking about normal family situations that we were able to get through before. Years ago, you wouldn't ever think of pulling a grandchild from a loving grandparent, especially if there has been a bond. That child relies on the grandparents, maybe for daycare, maybe the grandchild has been raised by the grandparents because the parents just took off or were not present. And so, unfortunately, these grandparents are having to go to court to fight for their rights, and it only is allowed in certain states. Certain states say grandparents have no rights. In Wisconsin, grandparents have rights only if there's been a bond established or a relationship established, I should say. But in my case, I have 4 grandchildren and I have no rights at all. And that's my daughter's choice. But in the case where grandparents are being ripped, or sorry, grandchildren are being ripped from the arms of their grandparents, who's protecting these poor children? I consider it abuse and neglect. It is mental and emotional torture for these babies where they're asking, where's grandma and grandpa? And their parents have no good reason to do this. If if you've been sexually abused by your parents, if your parent was an alcoholic or a drug addict and has put the lives of you and your children in danger, absolutely there should be limited to no contact. If a parent has had uh, issues with a substance, in my case, my dad was an alcoholic pretty much all throughout my youth. Then he stopped drinking. Then he started drinking again after the divorce. And he would drink and drive, and he went to jail a couple of times. I didn't stop loving him. I simply, he lost his license after a while, so then I would drive him around. But in that case, my children still had a relationship with my dad. But at that point, he was sober. Even when he was drinking, had, I was still with him with my children. And yet he never abused my kids. He just wasn't safe to drive. So, and I wouldn't have him babysit for him. It's just common sense. But in a case where you just disagree with your parents, that's no good reason. I'm sorry. So there should be laws in place where if you have videos, if you have texts, if you can prove that you've invested in your grandchildren and they've had a relationship with you in a bond, there should be consequences. So this is what they should be talking about in court. Dr. Phil just did a series on it. I can guarantee you if someone on the Supreme Court was ripped out of the arms of their grandchildren, it would be in court today. It would be a law and there would be consequences. So regarding the monetary consequences, should be pain and suffering, and if need be, maybe the children should be placed with the grandparents. And then see how the parents feel when they have their children ripped out of their arms. So that's all I'm talking about. I hope this helps, and I'll be back.